Let's talk about the Blue Wizards. Also, hello and welcome to Tolkien. Tolkien had two different versions of the Blue Wizards and it differs quite drastically. The Blue Wizards are mentioned as existing in Lord of the Rings, but no information is given about them within Lord of the Rings. It all came after. In that first version, they bore the names which I think are their most famous names, Alatar and Palando. It was said that the Blue Wizards were chosen to be among the Astari sent to Middle-earth by the Valar Orome, and that this in part accounts for why they went so far east, Orome being the Valar who had the most knowledge of the furthest regions of Middle-earth. It is also said at one point that Saruman went east with them, but he returned and the two Blues didn't. And according to a letter Tolkien wrote in 1958, it didn't go well with the Blues. I think they went as emissaries to distant regions, east and south, far out of Númenórean range, missionaries to enemy-occupied lands, as it were. What success they had I do not know, but I fear that they failed, as Saruman did, though doubtless in different ways, and I suspect they were founders or beginners of secret cults and magic traditions that outlasted the fall of Sauron. So in this version, they very much failed in their task, and then some. Much later towards the end of his life though, and Tolkien came up with a completely different account, and a much more positive one. In this version, the Blue Wizards were called Morienatar and Romistarmo. These names meant Darkness Slayer and East Helper, respectively. And this is what Tolkien had to say about them. Their task was to circumvent Sauron, to bring help to the few tribes of men that had rebelled from Melkor worship, to stir up rebellion, and after his first fall to search out his hiding, and to cause dissension and disarray among the Dark East. They must have had very great influence on the history of the Second and Third Age in weakening and disarraying the forces of the East, who would both in the Second Age and the Third Age otherwise have outnumbered the West. So in this later version, it turns out that the forces of the West, the elves and men, actually owe a great deal to the Blue Wizards, because they alone had headed east and south to regions where Sauron had dominion, because the Valar had never bothered to go there and interact with the inhabitants. And in doing so, they had managed to turn some of the people there away from Sauron and his machinations, which resulted in Sauron's forces being far smaller than they would have been in all the wars in the West. So while their task had been to find Sauron, and so they did technically fail their task, I think they made up for it pretty well. Again, like with a lot of things in Tolkien where there are numerous different versions of the same thing, I think it comes down to personal preference which one you want to go with. The latter one is the one I prefer just because it's more positive, and I like the idea that the Blue Wizards were out there, like, actually bothering with the people, like, which the rest of the Valar didn't do, and helping, and yeah, second one for me.